Hi, I'm Greg. Welcome to Affect Studio. I want to talk about my 30th anniversary Ibanez Musician bass and attempt to unravel some of its mysteries, like is it the MC30TH or the MC30th? This is number 11 of the 15 basses produced in 2009. There is roughly as much information about these as there is on the originals, by which I mean there's pretty much nothing. Plenty of photos online, and I've collected images of most of the 15. If you thought this sounded different to the way it did in my comparison video, well done. I decided to return it to the stock electronics for this so we can all hear how it sounded before I modified it, just in case it was great and I missed it simply because it wasn't what I was wanting or expecting. With 15 of these produced, they aren't the rarest musicians, as there were some one-offs, but obviously they're not at all common. This isn't the first time Ibanez reissued the Musician bass. They produced 3 guitars and 1 bass as the 80s custom legends in the mid-90s. Although one of the guitars pictured is actually from the mid-70s. The Musician bass looks to be based on the 81 version with the bridge from 83. These were only available in Japan. These 30th anniversary models look remarkably similar to the 90s reissue, more like a reissue of a reissue. I'm not convinced they had an original musician on hand when building these, as a number of things are different. Most of the changes aren't significant in regards to the performance of the bass, although some are. The neck angle is shallower, which means they needed to route the top to recess the bridge. They changed the design to this neck angle for the 85 models. The AccuCast B2 bridge introduced in 83 isn't as tall as the original AccuCast B. For the first couple of years after introducing the B2 version, the neck angle was unchanged, and they used a brass plate underneath to raise it up to the original height. This supports my theory that these are more like the 90s version, which used the B2 bridge. The depth of the recess in this looks to be the same as the thickness of the plates used before they changed the neck angle. So the reverse of what they did going from the AccuCast B to the B2, raised then, lowered here. The bridge is flawlessly crafted solid brass, almost double the weight of the originals. The body on these is solid ash, which they used from the end of 1981. Prior to that, they used mahogany core with ash front and back. Along with the neck angle, the body contours look to be the same as the 90s version, as the edges aren't as rounded. It has a deeper heel cut where the neck meets the body, although being handmade, none of mine are the same. Ibanez claimed the electronics in these were the same as the originals, using the EQ-B equalizer. They aren't, which is why I had changed them. When removing the equalizer, I was careful to wrap masking tape around the sets of wires going to each of the pots, so they could be reinstalled if needed, as they all used the same 3 colours. Trying to make sense of the wires while reinstalling it, I saw the colours were in a repeating pattern coming from the EQ, but only the blue and green wires stayed together going to 2 of the EQ pots. Thinking this was odd, I thought I would see what happened if I moved the yellow wires so they stayed as a set with the blue and green ones, which would be way more logical. Big improvement in tone. No idea what happened there, as I'm sure the solder joints were untouched before I removed the EQ. It's definitely not the same circuit as the originals, which can be confirmed with a couple of measurements using a multimeter. It is similar sounding, though not as nice. It has an active master boost as used on the original EQ from 79 and 80. I find the boost cut from the 81 version way more useful, so here's the EQ. So what about these pickups? I bought this as I wanted a musician with the original Super 4 pickups that was lighter weight than my 5.2 kilo original. Ibanez aren't responsible for the seller having faulty scales. They are responsible for the pickups though, which they claimed were Super 4s in wooden covers for higher fidelity. No idea how wood could be higher fidelity than plastic, but doesn't matter as these aren't single coil Super 4s, but regular humbuckers. Ibanez did use a humbucker in the studio basses from the same era as the first musicians. They were the Super T4 and the same size as Super 4s. I'm wondering if they used that design for these. It would explain the higher fidelity claim as both models are completely encased in their covers, where the Super 4s have exposed pole pieces. Here's a quick comparison with my 81 MC924. If Ibanez claims were accurate, these two should sound almost identical. I had flat wounds on this in my comparison video, but I borrowed the strings from my 80 model as the neck pickup is in a different position on that one. It's easy to change strings without damage with these quick release tail pieces. So as you can hear, a different tone, definitely not bad, lacking the growl, upper mid punch and overall clarity I love in the originals. No idea if it was by design or a mistake. One of these pickups has a 2004 date on it, so presumably they've been planning these models for a while, or maybe these pickups were from a project that didn't eventuate and they didn't want to waste them. It looks like they both had more information on them that has been removed. There will be no shortage of people who prefer this tone. It wasn't what I wanted from this bass, and not what Ibanez claimed it would be though. These pickups also have an incredibly low output, which doesn't help them make an impression. I will have matched the levels for the comparison with the 81 model you just heard, so we're hearing the tone, not the level differences. After realising the pickups weren't right, I thought I'd try the Super 4s of my original in this bass, but the pickup cavities are slightly narrower than the originals, and the build tolerances are so tight on this, real Super 4s won't fit. I ended up building hum-cancelling versions of the Super 4s, which are now in 3 of my musicians, and you can hear them in this bass in my comparison video. So what did they get right? The craftsmanship is second to none. I've never seen a bass or guitar that is built as well as this one. Not a huge fan of the shade of brown used on the bodies, although the originals aren't particularly attractive either. The finish is absolutely flawless though. I love the maple used on the neck. On more than one occasion I found myself admiring it while performing. Other people stare into space, I stare at the figured maple. I don't know if they used stabilising rods in this one. If they did, they definitely didn't use steel. You can get a powerful magnet to stick to the steel rods in the originals, which doesn't work on this. They stopped promoting the stabilising bars at some point in the 80s, so I don't know if they all had them or not. Both my beam basses definitely do, so still in use in 84. The Musician necks use a combination of flat sawn and quarter sawn maple along with walnut strips. Knowing what I do about acoustics, it makes sense to me that the combination would produce an even response even without the bars. All cavities are shielded as were the originals, this one using shielding paint where they originally used foil. I know they changed the shielding paint around 83 or 4 as my 83 beam bass has foil and the 84 has paint. The original pickups were mounted on aluminium shielding plates. These are screwed into the body. The cover plate for the rear cavity is the same size as the originals and has the same "built by the proud craftsman of Ibanez Japan" text. The mounting screw positions are different and no screws for the EQ mounting as they use Velcro this time. They went with a modern battery compartment which is better, no screw to lose. The inlays are a bit much for me, but a lot of people love them. Once again, the workmanship is phenomenal. I assume they've used some sort of laser cutting as they are perfect, no filler anywhere. I find it easy to get lost if I'm looking at them while playing, Better to rely on the side position dots. I changed the original machine heads to some Hipshot ultralights to make it slightly lighter because I didn't like the white buttons. I changed the EQ knobs to these, which are very similar to the vintage originals, as the ones used on this and the 90s version look cheap. They're also shorter, which makes them harder to find mid-song. The vintage ones disintegrate over time, so I've replaced most of them on my others as well. These came in a large road case that I've only used once, as it's so big and heavy. Amazingly, with such a huge case, the pocket is too small to fit much more than a set of strings. Definitely no room for a padded strap. So that's how it sounded as it left the factory. I feel like I've solved most of the unanswered questions about these, although I may never know for certain. I just need to decide whether to keep these pickups in it or return to my version of the Super 4s, which I definitely prefer. I have other musicians about the same weight that have the Super 4s, so it may not be essential to go back. No question about the EQ, though it's going. As always, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Please invite your friends along, and I hope to see you soon.